Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and second chance to ask some questions of you today. Thank you for testifying in multiple committees. Back in March, you noted that you had revoked some 300 student visas using the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act, which specifically says the Secretary of State can revoke a visa if an alien's activity in the U.S. would have a serious adverse foreign policy consequence. And that issue of 300, what's the number up to now? How many visas have you revoked?
I don't know the latest count, but we probably have more to do.
Can you give us an estimate?
Probably in the thousands at this point, depending. Not all of them are at under that statute. Some are people. So there's two visa
SEVIS,
revocations.
I don't want to go into SEVIS. It's a separate issue. And
No, they're related, but we can't conflate them because they're two different. One is the one you've decided, national interest of the United States. Some of the visa revocations are happening because somebody violated the terms of their visa. They dropped out of school or they got convicted of a crime or some criminal investigation.
Okay.
Those are separate from what you've said.
So 300 in March, but now 1,000. How many under this 1952 Act?
I'd have to
Roughly?
get you a good answer, but probably under 1,000. But I'd have to get
Can
you
you
the right
follow
answer.
up
I don't
and
want
get
to
us
speculate
an
about the
answer?
exact number.
And I'll tell you, this particular thing, it does bother me. And you testified in Louisiana Immigration Court in a pretty expansive interpretation of that 52 law, saying that it could be for citizens, it extends to any non-citizen for past, current, or expected beliefs, statements, or association. And that expected really caught my mind. This power rests solely, this 1950 law rests solely with you. And your interpretation sounds like you're saying if you, the Secretary of State, think you expect someone's beliefs or statements, past, current, or future, then you can toss their visa.
The visa is not a right, it's a privilege.
All right, so I will just say, and then I'm going to go on to another topic. I profoundly disagree. The Fifth Amendment is very powerful in protecting citizens and non-citizens alike with due process. I know this will be adjudicated in court, but the idea that one individual could on their opinion of someone's future activity or expected activity, that one individual being our Secretary of State can toss somebody's visa seems to me an extraordinary violation of due process. I won't ask you to defend it now. I'm happy to put it in writing for you to give us a follow-up and explain it better. But I do think it's a fundamental attack on freedom because due process is the guardian of the gate to keep a government from taking away people's life or liberty, and liberty is what happens when you take away a visa without due process. I want to turn to the issue my colleagues have mentioned, and that is there is a legal way to restructure the Secretary of State's department and USAID specifically. But what we saw on February 3rd was Elon Musk say, over the weekend, I tossed USAID into the wood chipper. That's a pretty profound weekend. It didn't involve consultation with Congress over the consequences. There was no rewriting of the law. There was no discussion of what funds could be delayed, frozen, redirected. And the result is different groups have estimated how many people have died to date and will die over the course of a year or a prolonged period as a result of the destruction of the weekend of February 1st and 2nd. Did Elon Musk have your support in putting USAID into the wood chipper?
Well, I don't think that's a X post, or I guess you're imagining a social media post, is not a government act.
Not at all. That's a quote. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, that's what he said, but that's not ultimately what happened as acting director. Is all these decisions
Did
have to
his
come to
actions
me.
have your full support?
The ones that I signed off on, yes, which is the ones that
Of
happened.
what
because
Elon Musk did with USAID?
No, but understand, these are contracts. All these
Did he do it
contracts.
without or with your support? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, not
Because
my support, it was my
team,
actions.
his Doge team did a lot of cancellations very, very quickly, and it fired a lot of people. It wasn't clear to me whether that had your
No,
support or not.
the Doge team didn't do anything. I did it. I was the one that made the decisions. I went through contracts, literally spreadsheets, line by line. I remember being in a hotel, I believe in Guatemala, going through line by line on spreadsheets of contracts that were canceled, contracts that were approved, contracts that were amended. These are all contracts.
So in that case, I'll put the responsibility with you since you're taking credit for it rather than with Elon Musk. But the Boston school of Public Health has a kind of a website where they post their estimated deaths as a result of the actions that were taken to dismantle USAID. And they're updating it continuously. So you go to it, the numbers keep changing. They have a one-year estimate, but they also have what they estimate has happened to today. And as of today, they estimate that the actions taken in putting USAID in the wood chipper, child malnutrition, 53,500 more deaths. And I'm rounding off because the numbers are continuously changing. Child diarrhea, 45,400 more deaths. Child pneumonia, 59,200 more deaths. Malaria, 25,100 more deaths. So what happened that weekend has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of children, and the estimate for the end of this year is much, much higher. This happened because the law was not followed for consultation with Congress, analysis, bringing in experts, holding hearings. How do you kind of accept what you just put forward, that it was your action to cancel these contracts? Your contracts in this fashion, freezing fund, firing individuals, has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of children.
That's false. That's fake. That's just not true. That's a study based on if we canceled every one of these programs permanently. Okay, and I'm reading it right here because I'm glad you brought it up. It assumes a near total freeze in U.S. foreign aid for HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and other diseases. There is not a total freeze. 85% of PEPFAR recipients are receiving their care right now. But the numbers you're saying, those aren't real numbers. I understand that's what the school said in the worst case dramatic scenario, and even then I think it's exaggerated. But there's just no evidence of the fact that, I don't remember what the numbers are, 100,000 children have starved to death in the last 4 months because the United States made reductions to USAID. Well, that first of all is pretty atrocious. That would mean that nobody else in the world is doing anything. We're taking care of the entire planet?
Well, I must say, I think your response does not fit with what the published results were, but there's other groups that have done this as well. There's a study in Nature with healthcare experts from a whole number of leading universities, and they said basically if you shut down USAID, and it may not be fully shut down, but my colleagues who follow this closely say, you know, it's 80, 90% shut down. And Nature study, or published in Nature, said, look, because of what has happened, we will see some 15 million additional deaths over 15 years just from HIV, producing 14 million orphans, and another 10 million people, children and adults, dying from malnutrition, tuberculosis, diarrhea, malaria, and other diseases. And there's even higher numbers from the Friends of the Global Fight Against AIDS. I think it's this rash shutdown without due process of law, that is not coming and doing it in collaboration with rewriting the law, freezing funds, canceling these contracts without consultation, that you have exacted enormous harm on the world.
Again, those numbers you're saying are staggering and unrealistic. The reality of it is, if what you're saying is that unless the United States funds foreign aid at these levels in perpetuity, the world's going to suffer 15 million deaths in 15 years, and every country should be voting for everything we want at the UN.
The number was 15.
Because we're basically funding and feeding the world.
15 million in the study of Nature, yes, from the shutdown of these programs.
Thank you.
You're recognized as Representative Jackson.
Thank you so much, and we acknowledge that we miss our dear colleague, Conley. Thank him for his years of service. Mr. Speaker, it was 39 years ago. Here in Washington, D.C., I was arrested while protesting against the apartheid government in South Africa's white minority that had a non-minority white, for the greater part of the latter half of the 20th century, held captive, if you will, in bondage, which sanctioned racial segregation and political and economic discrimination against its black citizens. I believe your policies on South Africa at this point in your career are wrong, precisely because either you do not understand the history of the country or you have grown indifferent, and I beg that you go to your higher nature. That being said, I want to ask you about President Trump ending U.S. government support for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility that promotes fairness in hiring and helps make our national security workforce the strongest it can be. In the name of advancing an anti-woke agenda, he has given himself permission to break the law, attacking congressionally mandated efforts that have enjoyed bipartisan consensus for decades. I believe not only in diversity is our strength as a country, but in fact, our workforce does not reflect our population, then it merits an inquiry into what are the impediments that are leading to that outcome. Would you agree with that latter statement, that diversity is our strength?
I think unity is our strength.
Okay,
That
well,
we're a diverse
furthermore,
nation is important,
while
but
those
unity
words
is our
you would
strength.
think that they were mine, they actually are recorded from you in your Senate hearing in July of 2022. Further, do you believe that following the law is important, yes or no?
We follow the law every day.
Okay. Well, you wear so many hats, it must be difficult to keep track of all the laws that you have supported, but yes, you did vote in favor of the bill, and I want to read a section of the bill that you did support. It's Section 5403 of the 2022 NDAA requires that the State Department to strengthen recruitment of people belonging to underrepresented groups. I know Mr. Trump has asked you all not to say that as cabinet officials, and I hope you have the guts to tell the president on some matters he is simply wrong. Mandating outreach to universities, employees' affinity groups, and expanding paid student internships are among the actions. So I would like to know, do you stand by strengthening diversity within the ranks of the State Department?
I stand by hiring the best people to do the job, irrespective of their background, their race, color,
So you're going
creed.
against the
That's
very
the
law
American
that you
way.
had once supported, which I find highly contradictory and hypocritical. I hope that you would have the courage of your convictions, be the Marco Rubio, the senator that we knew, and not the Secretary of State that is now capitulating to that of a tyrant and that of Donald Trump. At this point,
president's
I would
not a
like to
tyrant. He
yield
was
my
elected by the
balance of my
he was
time
elected
to
by the
that
voters
of
of the United
the Honorable
States.
Sarah McBride, and I thank you so much for your time.
Thank
The
you,
president
Robert.
was elected, as far
Thank
as I recall.
I've yielded my
Thank-
time, sir.
Representative Stanton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I make some remarks, I just want to say, as was said earlier, Jerry Conley, who we lost today, a great member of this body, a passionate advocate for the people of Virginia, particularly public servants working in the federal workforce. He was a mentor to so many of us who came into Congress after he started, and just one of the greats, and he will be missed dearly. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for being here today. In 2016, you warned, quote, "The world without American engagement is a world none of us wants to live with," unquote. I couldn't agree more, and I bring it up today because the threat from China has grown, not just due to global shifts outside of our control, but because of political choices by this administration. Short-term moves with no thought for long-term consequences. The Chinese Communist Party has spent years claiming America is too divided to lead and too unstable to trust. When you became secretary, many of us hoped you would help lead the fight to combat this propaganda, because that's exactly what you did so well serving in the United States Senate. For example, Mr. Chairman, without objection, I'd like to submit for the record the August 2023 op-ed written by then Senator Rubio on this very subject. Without objection? Yeah. Secretary Rubio, in this op-ed, you wrote that strong, credible deterrence against Beijing is the best way to keep, quote, far-flung controversy from impacting our way of life. You added, quote, "If there's even a hint that the United States will not honor its security commitments, it will encourage Beijing to engage in more hostility to test our resolve." I thought your framing was especially smart here because you weren't just warning about policy. You were making the case for credibility, and I couldn't agree more with then Senator Rubio. But here you are today as Secretary Rubio presenting a very different record. As Secretary, we've seen you defend or be complicit in reckless foreign policy that Senator Rubio once warned against, like strategically incoherent tariffs that alienate our allies, alliance-breaking decisions that weaken our national security, partnership neglect that isolates us, abandoned commitments that shred our credibility, and hand China easy propaganda wins. None of this is deterring China, Mr. Secretary. In fact, my concern is that unless we course correct and fast, this administration is handing Beijing a string of "I told you so" moments that only strengthen their position. Look no further than the Vice President. In February, Vice President Vance took the stage of the Munich Security Conference not to criticize our adversaries, but in a rather stunning moment, to attack our allies. In fact, he literally said, quote, "The threat that I worry about most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it is the threat from within, unquote. And just last month, the Ipsos global poll found that U.S. favorability fell in 26 out of 29 countries in just 6 short months. It's also the first time in the poll's history that more people now view China, not the United States, as the world's most positive influence. That's not just a perception problem, that's a strategic failure and the cost of inconsistency. Speaking of costs, these policies have also having Americans on edge as well. In Arizona, my home state, the Phoenix Sky Harbor alone, we have more than $750 million in annual exports at risk. Chip makers in Chandler in my district face increasing costs driven by the unpredictability and supply chain disruptions. At Arizona State University in my district, we rely on international students for tuition, research, and talent. They are being run off by the chaotic immigration policy that flies in the face of American values. The so-called brain drain is real, and it's tipping the balance of global innovation away from the United States. The challenge in this next century won't be fought on battlefields. It'll be the fight to shape the future, technology, trade, global trust. And if we keep turning our back on what makes America strong, we risk giving China the upper hand. I'll yield the rest of my